3, city stormwater discussion, I asked Michelle Closey to come up and give us a little overview based on some recent conversations in the public with regards to city stormwater and what we're doing, what we have been doing, and some of the impacts. Good evening, Michelle.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. There has been some letters circulating around with concerns with a combination of wastewater and stormwater issues in the south side of Bismarck. We wanted to provide a presentation here. We did receive notice of this complaint back on June 30th, and we provided our response on the July 1st to this area. And just wanted to, it seems like the issue is still circulating, so wanted to provide a response to let everyone know what was going on. The complaint was talking about seeing kind of waste that was tied with the storm sewer and kind of issues that have been happening over the last 20 years in South Bismarck. And what we wanted to convey today is that we haven't seen any factual basis to confirm any kind of sanitary sewer overflow in this area due to flooding, even over the 20-year period of time. This is the first complaint that we've received relating to raw sewage depositing on lawns, and we have not seen anything during our on-site reviews. Oftentimes after stormwater events, we're called into neighborhoods to look at issues, to help open up inlets that may be plugged, to try and alleviate flooding issues. And so we're often on the ground in areas that are that have concerns, and we have not seen this at any point in time during our events. The letter mentions a situation where it stated it's common to see young children playing in toxic water while human waste floats near them, and we have definitely not seen this situation, so we did want to confirm that that's not something that we have seen. It is possible that residents are seeing a surcharge to the stormwater system that can cause water to come out of the stormwater manholes and mistaking that for a sanitary sewer overflow. We did want to provide a little bit of information to kind of let you know what we're dealing with in South 12th Street, or actually in the South Bismarck area. If I can put this map up.
While you're doing that, Michelle, we clearly understand that there are events that cause surface water to be an issue in parts of our city, right?
Yes. So that's part of this thing. The complaint actually has two areas of focus. One is sanitary sewer, and the other one is stormwater. The sanitary sewer we definitely have not seen, but on the stormwater system, we definitely have areas that have been a concern and have been a concern for a period of time, and that we are trying to work to address. Basically what the map is showing here is in the red boundary is basically the watershed that we're dealing with. It's not the clearest version to be able to focus in on. This north area, up in that area, that's actually Bismarck High School in that area. So that's as far north as it's reaching is basically Bismarck High School. And then it comes down, you're seeing on that area is the airport. So it is a fairly large area. Any waterfall or rainfall events in this area is really contributing to the drainage within South Bismarck. So it is a large area. Wanted to mention more specifically is that we do have a lot of a network of stormwater pipeline that's actually in the ground trying to address stormwater issues. Thought that would come across a little bit easier. Wanted to highlight, is this speaker, I'm not sure how to actually
move
point
it.
And just pull it.
There you go.
All right. When you're dealing with the water flow along Main Street up here, we basically have a connection of lines that come down and tie all those water branches together within our stormwater system. And it actually comes into the pipeline that is basically feeds into the Denver ditch. This line right here is the open channel that's on the south side. We do have some pipeline that comes through by the fire station that connects it, the pipelines then to the ditch area. When we're dealing in this area, this red circle, the red circle is at Cashwise, and that is a low point. What we're having is we have a tremendous amount of flow that comes down the hill coming directly down and then having to make a right angle to be able to come over to the pipeline that then leads to the drainage area. So we do know that that's an issue for water coming down. We also have a small portion in here that actually feeds back up north to that same corner to before it flows towards the drainage area that heads down south. So this area is another piece that collects. It's kind of the pipes are all coming together to come to the connection point there. I put a couple of points on here. This is an elevation of 1685, and the point right at the center at Cashwise is an elevation of 1635. So it's just trying to recognize that we have a 50-foot drop in elevation that we're dealing with in a fairly short distance, and it basically does put a lot of pressure on the water coming down. In this situation, just to go further on South 12th Street then, we have other systems that connect in to be able to pull water both north and south and heading over west to the drainage area. And then we have another collection system down here that moves water over to the drainage area. Because we're so low lying within the southern portion of the area, and you're seeing that kind of drop of 50 feet in elevation, it does take time for the South Bismarck water to actually move in the system. We oftentimes see at the Denver ditch, we have a gauge station. This is covering one of the recent 2.5-inch rainstorm events, which is a pretty significant rainstorm event. And you're seeing that the ditch actually climbs from an elevation of the 1626 to close to 1633. So we have a pretty significant climb that comes over a short period of time, a couple hours. But part of this is it's so incredibly flat, the drainage ditch, it basically is only dropping less than a foot when you're going between the Wachter Middle School and then Washington Street, which is close to a couple miles away. It's only dropping a foot in elevation. So it's a very flat, low-lying drainage ditch. It just moves very slowly. To move water out of this area, it may take, in this situation, you're seeing the drop is actually, it took 2 days to be able to drain from this 2.5-inch event. What happens is the low-lying area actually does then just take time to be able to move the water through. What we're looking at is we've done some modeling recently within the entire watershed to try and find out some options for our low-lying areas that are having issues. And this is going to be presented fairly soon, so this is kind of the quick overview, and there will be a presentation of the options. But what we're finding is we have several areas that are having issues, and even the solution is going to be taking multiple solutions to address specific areas within this South Bismarck area. And to give you a highlight, this is looking at costs of tens of millions of dollars for these projects. It's not like one project can take care of the situation in the entire in this entire region. It actually takes multiple projects, and there's some areas that are very specific to one project affecting a few blocks. So it's not like it can affect a large area to be able to provide assistance. And the other thing to highlight too is this is a very difficult area to address with stormwater. What we do know is that even with the projects that we're looking at trying to present, it actually just kind of takes the edge off things. There still will be flooding events. It may help in the 2-year events or the 5-year events, but when we have very large rainstorm events, we are still going to have issues in these areas even after spending a good investment to try and provide additional protection in these areas. What we're planning on doing is trying to get you that information to let you know what the modeling has shown, and wanted to also let you know is the last couple of rain events in June and July, the 2.5-inch events, and a lot of the smaller ones, we've actually had our engineers in the field to be able to calibrate the model. And they are actually showing that the model is indicating what's actually on the ground. So we know that this information is actually good, reliable information to use to help us base some decisions of how we're moving forward. I think that is basically the highlights.
Thank you, Michelle. I've two questions. So roughly when might you be back to us with some information? Period of time?
I think it's not the next commission meeting, but probably the following one. We're still trying to do it in August.
And then my second question, Michelle, have we ever, and you may have to turn to somebody like Keith, have we ever had a breach of our sanitary system?
Not, when we're looking at this area over the last 20 years, we've not had a breach of the sanitary system with the stormwater. It hasn't happened in this region. We're not sure why this connection is being made in this specific area. The only way that we understand this is if we're seeing stormwater come up from manholes and thinking that it's coming from a sewer system. Our sewer system and our stormwater system are not connected. We don't have that connection in this area. So,
Questions for Michelle, Commissioner Asfeg?
Say that last part again, because I think that's important for folks to understand and make sure they know. So when we do, there's two types of underground water removal. There's stormwater, and then there's sanitary sewer, and they're completely separate.
they're completely separate.
And there are no connections anywhere, either in that area or anywhere else in our community.
We don't have any other connections. Historically, near Washington Lift Station, there was ways that if in emergency situations, flood scenarios, but that is actually having to use pumping or something for the connection of systems. So there's no automatic connections, no ties between the systems. There are points in times where our sanitary sewer does have backups. And those things that we have to address within the community. Typically that has been dealing with root issues or other types of issues. It really has not been flood-related issues.
So the second question then, just to make sure is, and I thought I heard you say it, and I just want for my clarity about, in terms of the complaint that has been filed, there has been no factual evidence presented about sewage seeping because of a flood event or anything of that nature.
We did not have any factual information presented to us, and we haven't heard any other complaints or calls that were coming in, even over the 20-year period of time. It is actually distracting. There's important issues that we need to address with stormwater. It's really good to stay on point. If your issue is stormwater, it's best if you can actually tell us those issues relating to stormwater, because the stormwater issues on their own is enough to rise to a level that needs to be addressed. It needs to be looked at, and that's what has been happening, is trying to find some solutions there, but mixing the two.
The last question I have, Michelle, and thanks for this update because I think it's important for folks to understand, is this area is very complex, and it's kind of the bottom of the bathtub, for lack of a better term, and you did a great job of kind of highlighting some of that. I know that I held the stormwater portfolio when this study started, so how long have they been looking at this so that we can get to a potential fix, I guess?
It's been longer. I think it was part of the 10-year improvement plan also. The last update, though, was that I was aware of is the management plan update that was in 2013. And this modeling study was there was assumptions made in that 2013 that we actually needed to verify. And so now we've taken the time to run the model. We've actually done the calibration. We've looked at it from recent rainstorm events, so we're confident in that model. That just gives us an indication of where the water's going and what's actually happening on the ground. Now we have to come up with the solutions to address it. And seriously, the options that we're looking at are tens of millions of dollars. This is a big investment of how we move forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Commissioner Marquardt.
And thank you, Michelle. And that's one thing that, I as the current portfolio holder, and Michelle's been updating me on a lot of these different issues, but it is complex, like Mr. Asvik had said, and we need to take a look. Our staff is doing as best as we can to work with that. We know we have some issues, but moving forward, there's going to be some infrastructure that we need to talk about. So thank you very much for addressing the issue, Michelle.
Thank you. Any, Commissioner Guy.
Thank you. Michelle, would these proposed solutions also address the problems in the 5th Street area?
So on 5th and Bowen, there's some issues there, and then there's some issues a little bit further west as well. And what happened is there's actually several areas that have issues, and those options are trying to cover those areas. But what's happening is even the biggest option doesn't fix things in all areas, and it's not making a necessarily making the flooding issues go away in all areas too. It's basically reducing the time of flooding or the duration of flooding, but it is very complex, so there's almost individual solutions for each area that's having issues. But we will be able to have, this is just kind of the prelude, we'll have some further information for you and be able to answer those questions directly. One other thing just to highlight, in our view, a lot of times street flooding and some of the water being held in ponds is looked at as a negative for stormwater. It is actually how cities do handle stormwater. So if you're able to contain it within the curb and gutter, that's actually a positive because then it's not providing impact to property. If you're able to contain it in ponds and let the ponds have time for the rest of the system to drain, that's actually a positive too. So we really try and look at all these components fit together to be able to address stormwater issues, and it does become pretty complex, but we do have a good handle on it here and trying to provide some good options.
Commissioner
Thank
Olben?
You had mentioned 2013 is kind of when this was first addressed. Was some of the stormwater issues happening before then?
Oh, a long time before.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's nothing that other factors that have come into play that has made this more of an issue, or it's been an issue or a challenge?
There's things that are adding, but the city is also addressing those pieces as well. I know this is odd, but even the sand that we use for sanding our streets and what actually goes into our drains to help not reduce the flow, all those things matter. So even improvements that we've made in the street department have actually cleared out that intersection on the 90-degree bend that we were talking about. We actually had some pipe that was more blocked than it should have been maybe 5-6 years ago. We've actually been able to clean that out. So there's a lot of the smaller improvements with existing infrastructure that we have been working on. It's just you're not seeing that big wow or that big impact to say we've really seen a decrease in what we're seeing.
Is that your way of saying it's Jeff's fault?
No, I'm
Well,
actually saying it's actually helpful because it's amazing on how each department really does benefit others when we kind of find good solutions. So I enjoy working with them.
Any other questions for Michelle? Michelle, thank you very much. We have a